Welcome to the deep dive. We're taking a look at some source material today that tackles a topic that sounds, well, pretty intense. Sudden Sniffing Death Syndrome.
It really is. It's a name that definitely gets your attention. And the sources you've got, including excerpts from that piece, Sudden Sniffing Death Syndrome, A Deadly Reality, and a pretty recent 2024 study from the Journal of Forensic Sciences, they really highlight how serious this is.
Yeah, and it's strange because the sources themselves mention this kind of confusion around it. Like, is it really a thing, or is it just, scare tactics from anti-drug campaigns?
Right. But the sources seem to land pretty firmly on no, this is a documented tragic reality. It's directly linked to inhaling, well, really common stuff.
And the need to understand it seems critical.
Absolutely. So our mission here, digging into your material, is to try and cut through that confusion. Look at the science, the very real risks, and the tragic side of it too, and really stress why awareness is just so vital, especially for young people.
And the part that really, gets you is that we can be talking about products you literally have in your house right now.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try and unpack what the sources are telling us.
Okay, so first off, what even is sudden sniffing death syndrome? The sources basically define it as an abrupt, totally unexpected death caused by inhaling volatile substances.
And these are often household things.
Yeah, often everyday household or commercial products. The material lists examples like aerosol sprays,
Right.
think spray paint, deodorant, even computer duster.
Computer duster, wow.
Yeah, and also glues, paint thinner, and even nitrous oxide, from whipped cream dispensers sometimes.
Okay, so what happens? Someone inhales this stuff.
And they get a very rapid high. The
Yeah.
sources mention euphoria, maybe hallucinations, this feeling of detachment.
A quick kind of disorienting high, the name, sudden sniffing death. That obviously implies something much, much worse.
Exactly. That's the critical danger. Inhaling these chemicals can trigger absolutely catastrophic health effects almost instantly. We're talking severe heart complications that can lead straight to sudden death.
So the term itself?
Well, it was coined to describe these cases where someone, often young, often seemingly healthy, just dies very suddenly right after using inhalants. And the mechanism the sources point to, it's typically a fatal cardiac arrhythmia.
An arrhythmia, like an irregular heartbeat.
It's a severely irregular heartbeat, yeah. Basically, it stops the heart from pumping blood the way it needs to.
Okay, that explains the sudden death part clearly. But back to that confusion you mentioned. Why would people doubt this is a real risk?
Well, the sources do acknowledge some skepticism exists. Some might see it as, very rare or maybe exaggerated in anti-drug messages.
The medical experts.
They and the forensic experts cited in your sources really emphasize that it is real. They point to documented cases, clear autopsy evidence. For instance, the sources mention NINAIDA data.
And INAIDA, National Institute on Drug Abuse.
That's the one. They report thousands of ER visits in the U.S. every year because of inhalant abuse. And tragically, a number of those end in fatalities specifically put down to SSDS.
And because it's so sudden and the stuff is easy to get.
It makes it a major public health concern. The sources really stress that needs serious attention.
That accessibility point feels huge, doesn't it? It's not like tracking down illegal drugs. So let's talk more generally about inhalant abuse based on the sources. What are inhalants, technically?
Simply put, the sources say they're chemicals that produce vapors you can inhale for, well, psychoactive effects. People call it huffing, sniffing, sometimes dusting.
And the types listed, they cover a really wide range.
Oh, a very wide range. Things you'd see almost anywhere. The sources group them into categories like aerosols, spray paint, deodorant, that computer duster again.
Right.
Then solvents, paint thinner, gasoline, nail polish remover, gases like nitrous oxide, propane, butane, and even glues and markers modeled glue, permanent markers.
So, yeah, not obscure lab chemical stuff in homes, hardware stores.
Exactly. And that accessibility, plus often being cheap, is part of the danger, especially for teenagers and young adults. The sources bring up the 2023 Monitoring the Future survey.
What did that find?
It found that about 8% of U.S. 8th graders reported trying inhalants at least once. 8%.
Wow, 8th graders.
Yeah.
That's really sobering when you think about it. And
Yeah.
while the immediate effect might just be, feeling dizzy or euphoric for a bit,
The risks go way, way beyond that. The sources are very clear. Inhalants are central nervous system depressants.
meaning they slow things down.
Yeah, they impair coordination, judgment. They can cause some pretty nasty side effects, too, like nausea, headaches, even
And
seizures.
someone keeps using them?
Wrong turn. Oh, Chronic use can lead to really serious, often irreversible damage. We're talking brain, liver, kidneys, lungs. But here's the bit the sources highlight that is just, well, it's fascinating scientifically, but utterly terrifying.
What's that?
SSDS can happen even on the very first time someone tries an inhalant.
Wait, the first time? With no warning signs.
Often with no warning signs at all.
How is that even possible from something like, I don't know, huffing computer duster just once?
That's the absolute critical point the sources make. It comes down to the specific chemicals. Things like toluene, which is common in paint thinner, or butane, you find that in lighters, aerosols, computer dusters.
Okay.
These chemicals have a unique, dangerous effect. They sensitize the heart. They make it abnormally, dangerously responsive to adrenaline.
So it's not just the chemical causing damage directly, it's how it makes your heart react to something your own body produces, adrenaline.
Exactly. That's a key insight from the source material. The fatal event is often triggered by a sudden release of adrenaline.
Which could happen just from being excited or scared.
Absolutely. Physical exertion, excitement, stress, even the fear of getting caught using it.
Yeah.
When that adrenaline surge hits a heart that's been sensitized by these chemicals, bam, it can throw the heart's whole electrical system into chaos.
And that chaos is the arrhythmia.
Yes. The sources describe it leading to ventricular fibrillation or tachycardia. Basically, the heart starts beating so fast and erratically, it just can't pump blood effectively.
So the brain.
The brain and other vital organs get starved of oxygen almost immediately. This leads to sudden collapse and often death within minutes. That 2024 study in the Journal of Forensic Sciences specifically mentioned how often SSDS happens without any prior symptoms. That's what makes it so lethal.
And autopsies confirm this. It's not just a theory.
That's what the sources indicate, yes. Autopsy findings in these SSDS cases often show no pre-existing heart problems, no structural disease.
Which points right back to the chemical.
It strengthens the conclusion that the fatal arrhythmia is a direct result of the inhalant's chemical effect on the heart's electrical signaling, not some underlying weakness. It really drives home that chilling unpredictability. A single sniff could potentially be fatal, even in someone who seemed perfectly healthy moments before.
It's just staggering.
And the sources also mention, depending on the substance, other things can contribute, like oxygen deprivation, asphyxia, or direct damage to heart tissue. But that sensitization leading to arrhythmia is highlighted as a major pathway.
Given how easy these things are to get, and that 8th grade statistic, it makes a horrible kind of sense that young people are hit hardest by this.
They absolutely are. I mean, think about whipped cream canisters with nitrous oxide, or those computer duster cans with butane or propane. They're just there in homes, on store shelves.
And often no age restrictions,
Yeah.
unlike alcohol or tobacco.
Exactly, which must create this really dangerous false sense of safety.
Yeah, I can see that.
So young people might experiment, maybe at parties, maybe just out of curiosity, or perhaps because it feels less risky or, less stigmatized than trying other kinds of drugs. They often just have no clue that something so common could be instantly lethal.
Are there numbers on youth use?
Yeah, the sources cite SAMHSA, that's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Their data shows inhalant abuse peaks among 12 to 17-year-olds. Over 600,000 U.S. adolescents report using them annually.
Over 500,000 teenagers. That's just, wow. And the social factors must play a big role at that age.
Huge factors. Peer pressure, definitely. Curiosity is a big one. Sometimes, maybe it's a way to cope with stress or difficult feelings, looking for a quick escape.
And because the products themselves are legal and don't look like drugs.
It absolutely feeds into that dangerous idea that they're harmless, or at least low risk, which they are absolutely not.
And the tragedy, as the name spells out, is that SSDS hits without warning.
Exactly. It leaves families, friends, whole communities just shattered, losing someone, especially a young person, so suddenly to something found in their own home. The emotional toll of these preventable losses is just immense. The sources really convey that.
To make this less abstract, the sources included a couple of specific cases. Could you walk us through those that really bring the reality home?
They do, unfortunately. They show the human cost the sources are describing. One case involved a 15-year-old boy. He was at a party, used computer duster, likely butane. According to the account, he laughed, stood up, and then just collapsed suddenly.
Yeah.
Paramedics tried, but couldn't revive him.
And the autopsy.
Confirmed SSDS caused by butane exposure. And crucially, he had no known prior health problems.
That laughing, standing up, it sounds exactly like the adrenaline trigger you described hitting a sensitized heart.
It tragically fits the pattern, yes. Another case detailed was a 19-year-old woman. She used paint thinner recreationally with friends.
Taint thinner containing toluene.
Likely toluene, yes. She started feeling dizzy, had some chest pain, but apparently just dismissed it as part of the high.
Oh, no.
Minutes later, she lost consciousness, died shortly after reaching the hospital. The coroner's finding was SSDS, fatal arrhythmia, triggered by the toluene.
God, those are just heartbreaking stories. They really hammer home how random and devastating this can be, even in healthy young people. It absolutely underlines that urgent need for education the sources keep mentioning.
It really does. And that brings us to the most important part, really, prevention. The sources are adamant that preventing these tragedies starts with awareness and education.
But if the products are so common and the dangers are, well, kind of hidden in plain sight, especially from kids and parents, what are the strategies? What do the sources suggest?
Well, the challenge is getting that message out there effectively, right? The sources point to key places like schools, community programs, public health campaigns. The main strategies listed include
Education first, like directly in schools.
yes, absolutely. School programs, workshops are seen as vital, teaching young people specifically about the risks of inhalants and really hammering home that message, even one time, can be deadly.
And parents, what's their role?
Absolutely critical. Parental vigilance, the sources call it. That means knowing which products contain these dangerous chemicals, maybe locking away aerosols, glues, solvents, or at least monitoring them. And most importantly, having direct, open conversations with their kids about these specific dangers, not just general drugs are bad talk.
Right. Specific risks of specific common items.
Exactly. And then there's community support,
How so?
offering things like support groups or counseling. These can help address the underlying reasons someone might experiment: peer pressure, stress, anxiety. The sources also touch on maybe meeting regulatory changes.
Like what? Warnings on cans?
Yeah, advocating for clearer, maybe stricter labeling on these products, explicit warnings about abuse dangers, lethal effects.
What about doctors? Can they help?
They can play a part too. Screening for substance use during checkups, especially with adolescents, being ready with resources for kids or families who might be at risk. And there are resources out there.
Like from NETA and SAMHSA.
Yes, those organizations, NIDA and SAMHSA, offer free educational materials that schools, parents, communities can use. The core message coming through loud and clear from the sources is this: SSDS is a preventable tragedy.
Well, this deep dive into your sources has certainly brought the stark reality of sudden sniffing death syndrome into focus. It's clearly a very real, incredibly deadly risk tied directly to inhaling chemicals from everyday items.
Yeah, and we've seen how these chemicals can just catastrophically mess with the heart's rhythm, leading to sudden, unpredictable death, often hitting young, healthy people the hardest.
By digging into the material you shared, we've been able to unpack the science behind it, get a handle on the risks, and feel the weight of the tragic impact through those documented cases.
Yeah.
So what's the big takeaway? I mean, it seems clear that awareness and prevention aren't just, good ideas. They're essential, potentially life-saving tools against this danger that's hiding in plain sight in so many homes and communities.
Absolutely. And maybe it leaves you, the listener, with this thought to chew on based on everything we've looked at from the sources.
Yeah.
Just think about how many seemingly ordinary, everyday items around us might actually harbor these kinds of extreme hidden dangers. And what does that awareness imply about how we need to understand and interact with the world that seems so familiar?
A really powerful point. What stands out most to you from this deep dive into the sources?